Welcome to Boxcars, Warhammer 40K podcast, season 2, episode 2. This time I met with Ryan, my co-host, for Meta Analysis, but specifically Meta Analysis from a point of view of Adeptus Custodes, because we both play Adeptus Custodes. We are committed to that faction for the time, and we want to follow the meta, how it develops, and also share that knowledge with anyone who wants to listen to us. Right, Ryan?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's awesome. I was just a little bit taken aback. I've never been called a co-host before, so this is like,
yes.
I was kind of like.
Well, we do it together, and it's probably you do more of the talking because I have a bit of cold, so you have to be a co-host now.
Fair enough. Sorry, I kind of dropped my cue there.
And also
rookie mistake.
Yeah, happens. But because the idea is that we'll do it more or less every month. Maybe if there is some big meta shakedown, we might do it an extra episode after that. But the idea is that the meta doesn't change that fast. So once a month, we should sit down and make a talk about it, how the meta is developing currently and how the Adeptus Custodes can handle that meta, and what builds are maybe currently better than the others in this environment.
Yep, that sounds great. And obviously, what would that would be then? That would mean that we're talking Space Marines and Necrons today, I think.
Yeah,
mostly.
Mainly. Although I don't know, are Hurricanes and Death Guards still in game as so to say about the top spots, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say sort of the meta is what it is. So yes, all the top meta armies prior to the coming of the new Space Marine Codex and the new Necron Codex, I think, still are meta. But in light of the Space Marines and the Necrons currently getting their shine, I don't think that. I mean, that's definitely a topic we could discuss. But I don't like, as far as how they relate to Adeptus Custodes, how Death Guard relates to Adeptus Custodes, how some of those armies. I mean, I guess they did also get some buffs. Now that that makes, because they got all the Melta buffs as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
So, and I also heard that Adeptus Sororitas got a buff that is directly connected to heavy bolter changes and multi-melta changes.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, so just to make to add some to say a plan to our talk is what we want to do is start with what we think is the hardest matchup for Adeptus Custodes and probably commit more time to that, and then next one and the next one would be the easier matchups going on, and sometimes we'll probably start with the biggest meta shakedown, so to say, and start with that. But for today, because it's the first time, so we haven't talked about that yet, so we should probably start with what we think is the hardest matchup for Adeptus Custodes at the moment, what we should worry about.
Yeah, I think we should definitely focus on the buffs that were given to heavy bolters, multi-meltas, and then I guess those two things in and of themselves, I think, would probably give us enough to talk about. Those two things affect a ton of stuff. That's across armies. There's a lot of armies that will benefit from that being a status norm now. So I would say the obvious are more devastating to Custodes, or more detrimental to Custodes right off the cuff, because it's pretty much damage increase. It's not shot output. It's not, it's just damage increase. And so, because one of the strengths of Adeptus Custodes armies is the fact that we have all multi-wound models, I do see it as kind of I wouldn't say a slap in the face necessarily, because I think Primaris also sort of It is. I think.
Yeah.
I think designedly it was to sort of counter the Primaris. To say, look, like sort of the advent of Primaris, making heavy bolters flat to damage. You're throwing a bone to Adeptus Sororitas. You're throwing a bone to Imperial Guard. You're throwing a bone to Chaos, who now have essentially a Primaris killing weapon as sort of a stock weapon now with the heavy bolter, where that wasn't the case before, where those 2 wounds could be really hard to chip off if you had a bunch of Leman Russes with bolters and maybe you're rolling low on your shots or something. Those secondary weapons didn't really seem to factor in. I know the standard for a while there was taking Leman Russ tanks with no sponsons whatsoever. That was a pretty meta thing to do. It was just cheapen them, take the Demolisher cannon. You have to take a whole mounted weapon, heavy bolter, good to go. And I think this change is opening the possibility to go, no, 9 shots of strength 5, neg 1, flat 2 damage in a Primaris heavy environment is not necessarily a bad buy, especially without any real substantial point increase to that weapon. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but we have kind of an answer also handed out with the update for the heavy bolter, I think, because with our storm shields being straight buff, now we have 1+ save on the troops with the storm shield.
That's correct.
So the minus or neg 1 heavy bolter is still 2 up. So we actually can handle heavy bolters pretty well when we bring storm shield troops, or at least one guy with a storm shield.
Right.
So those troops are resilient, or more resilient to heavy bolters, kind of. I myself, if my cold is over this weekend, I want to try a 1 unit of troops that will have like 5 guys, basic troops with 2 storm shields, and I'll see what their staying power is, etc. Because I want to try out that buff if it's something that can be used to our advantage. Especially counters as well the multi-meltas, right? Because 3 up invuln is better than 4 up that we have on most of our stuff, right?
I agree that. I mean, it did sort of soften the blow, when I do use the term slap loosely. I mean, an Adeptus Custodes should be able to take a slap in the face. I didn't mean to say that in a way that
I know
it caused people to complain about it. It was just, I guess, I'm merely saying that, our power units, things like Alaris Terminators, things like Virtus Praetors, things like even Wardens. I know a lot of people are not, fond of Wardens, thinking they're kind of less than meta or whatever. But they are a power unit in our army. And the fact of the matter is that all these, actually Wardens only have 3 wounds, but still, Virtus Praetors, Aquilons, these are all units that have 4 wounds. And so when suddenly you have, these weapons potentially becoming much more popular that do flat 2 damage rather than 1 damage, you're essentially getting twice their value,
exactly,
against units that have those 4 wounds, so, suddenly your 5 or 10 point heavy bolter needing 4 shots to get through suddenly is worth, 10 or 20 points,
Yeah, especially that there was no update for point values, right? So they are just double as good as they were.
Right. So, at least with regards to their damage. So I think that does affect disproportionately. I think it does affect Adeptus Custodes armies, but I agree. That doesn't mean we should surrender. It doesn't mean we should get out of the fight or call.
Never surrender.
Yeah, I think overall it was intentionally to try to balance the Marine meta. I don't think it was particularly designed to try to slap Custodes. I think that was maybe an aftershock of its effect, but you're right. We did get the shield, the shield buff, which was helpful. And so we can't say that we didn't get anything,
So we are the only ones that actually benefited from the shield change, right? Everybody else was either stayed the same in case of Terminators, with the stone shields, everybody else is just worse, straight worse, right? So
Right. Yep. Yeah. So like, again, I don't disagree with the move, but like I said, I do think to a certain degree those buffs, if you look at compared to other armies, perhaps disproportionately affect Custodes, but only in the margin that Custodes are much fewer models and they're worth a lot more points. So when you chip off 2 wounds of a Primaris Marine, it's 17 points. When you chip off 2 wounds of a Virtus Praetor, it's 55.
that's 50.
It's 47.5 points. So there's a disparity there. But that's only speaking of one advantage. The Adeptus Custodes being smaller units have other advantages. Like you can hide your 95 point Virtus Praetor a lot easier than you can hide 5 Primaris Marines or whatever the exact quantity of that would be. There's obviously advantages, disadvantages, but I do think that in that regard, there's some to say, okay, as Adeptus Custodes players, we do need to take into consideration that aspect of the meta a little bit more than, say, like an Orc player would. There's only 1 or 2 units that might be disproportionately affected within an Orc army or a Drukhari army, to take that into account. But honestly, I was more thinking on the multi-melta change. The heavy bolter change wasn't really kind of. I didn't feel like I had to batten down the hatches or anything over that, but the multi-melta change does, I think, affect us a little bit more so, because changing those weapons to within melta range, changing them to flat 2 plus D6 now.
Yes.
And in some cases more than that. I think in like Sisters of Battle.
In case of eradicators as well, they have better meltas.
Yeah. So you suddenly have 40-point models that can fairly consistently do 4 flat damage, at range from an alpha strike, or used as a counterpunch. And I think that is, and then the other factor to that is this such a high volume then of those weapons? The Sisters of Battle, Space Marines, Imperial Guard. These are all armies that can have a disproportionately high volume of melta weapons, and so I think that is more concerning for Custodes. That is something that we have to really take into consideration. And I know there's a lot of people who just preach the Storm Shield, but I think there's only, like we all know, there's only so many shots a Storm Shield can take, and if he's going to blitz 3 damage off of that every time he gets through, that's it's a different kind of risk, and I don't think it's going to help Custodes just to gravitate back to all Storm Shields, and I don't think it's going to help competitive play to just purport a very passivistic sort of gameplay. The Storm Shield sort of spam was always very passive. It's always you just march around and hold on objectives.
Yeah, the first instinct, so to say, is to think, okay, now vehicles will be worse off because there will be a lot of meltas that will be better than they used to be. So the first instinct would be, okay, so I will gravitate toward my foot slogging Custodes build. But actually, if we take a look, because we both play with RS in our list, right? So right. This is also, it's not a very popular build, but people try it out from time to time. So the RS is pretty resilient to even massive melta shots. The question is, if you use Shadowkeeper's stratagem, Grim Responsibility, so they will wound on 5s, right? Unless they are salamanders, but that's the different animal. So let's say there are like 4 or 5 4 or 5 guys, eradicators, which are most dangerous Meta guys, shooting at our RS, like probably 2.5 will hit, one of them will only wound, and you have a chance that you will save that. So it's not end of the world, I would say. And then the rerolls are not so not so many rerolls anymore, because Chapter Master is not working on everything. So
yeah, you got to keep in mind though I think the eradicators are core units. So, and salamanders probably make up at least a third of the Space Marine lists, which tend to make up
unfortunately.
Like a third of the. I would say maybe at least a third of the Space Marine armies if we're just rounding some figures. So I mean, it's in a 6-round tournament or a 5-round tournament, it's a fairly good chance you're going to be playing salamanders at least once.
So the worst case scenario, they have 3 units of eradicators, five guys each, and they each put 6 shots versus your bird.
Well, it would be
that's 18 shots. That's
maybe 10 shots each, because it's 5, 15.
Oh yeah, right.
15 total eradicators all shooting twice. That's 30 shots at the Ares gunship. So,
God damn it,
you're looking at
a lot.
It's a lot. So you do Emperor's Auspice to turn off the rerolls, because he'd probably throw a Chapter Master next to him, and he's salamanders anyways. So you're gonna do that anyways. So he's gonna hit on 4. So he's gonna get like 15 hits. He's gonna wound on 5s. You're looking at 5 wounds. Not the end of the world.
And you might save 2 of them, so you're probably not dead, and that's heavy portion of his army shooting, right?
Right. So I mean, you're still looking at 3d6 damage in a single turn. Yes, it's not. It's not like a given. By any stretch, but that was. Eradicators are very common, and so as far as like meta concerns are, we do have to really I do think that it does push play towards the Ares gunship, because if you switch that equation to just storm shields, you have 30 shots shooting at 24 inches, at a unit of storm shield guys. It's going to be a little bit better to hit. So you're hitting on 3s. You do Emperor's Auspice, you're going to get 20 hits. If you're salamanders, you're going to be wounding on 2s. You're looking at without rerolls, you're still looking at 17 wounds. The storm shields, a third of those going through, so 6 of those going through. That's possibly 6 dead custodians, in 1 round of shooting, and that's not even half of their army. At 24 inches, if he deploys properly. So, that's why I say moving away from the infantry based custodian army, I think is meta. It is meta, because even being able to hide those big blocky storm shield units behind cover, you can't deploy them. You can't come out and play. Essentially, you have to just kind of hunker and hide. And they have you pinned at that 24 inches. You either move on objectives or you lose the game to primary points. You might pick up some secondaries for things like while we stand, we fight, but you're not going to win the game, playing it that way. But at least with a unit of Adeptus Praetors, you have half the models. You can hide better behind that terrain, and you're more efficient in then moving on objectives because you can jump the terrain. Your movement is more than twice the distance, and you have, salvo launchers. Possibly if you go with salvo launchers on your Adeptus Praetors that can shoot back at the eradicators and erode their efficiency. So to me, when it comes to matchups within the Custodes army, it's 100% Adeptus Praetors over Storm Shields. 100%. I don't think there's any way you can really make an argument otherwise. They're so much more efficient for their points. Yes, it's a little bit less than twice the amount. You only get 4 wounds rather than 6, but with those high damage shots, it really is a matter of using the terrain and preventing those shots altogether, rather than thinking because my invulnerable save is just a 3+ rather than a 4+, I'm somehow going to just tank all this and get away with it. We've all rolled 3-ups badly. We've all rolled up 3-ups really good. But when you give your opponent basically 5 turns just to shoot at you while standing on objectives, it really is going to pan out to be a bad move, for you. I mean, you'd have to roll really good for a long time, and that's just, we just know that doesn't really happen, except in the most rare of circumstances during a dice game. So that's what I've been kind of telling people. That's how I play. That's how I think I'm going to stay afloat in the meta myself, is just continuing to use, the things that I see strength in. The Virtus Praetors. I think Alaris also has some really strong play as an alpha striking unit still against Eradicators, but I honestly think it has less, because you can still deep strike Virtus Praetors, in the case of like having zero terrain. Shot for shot, I would still want a salvo launcher over a Guardian axe, a Gastellan axe, and a ballistic grenade launcher. If I was shooting at Eradicators, if I had to choose which one to pick, especially with Archaeotech munitions. The Virtus Praetors, obviously the charge then is about the same. It's a 9-inch charge coming out of deep strike either way, unless you're Dread Host, but you can still use that on Virtus Praetors as well. But if you don't make that charge, the Virtus Praetors are going to have substantially more play than in that follow-on turn. So the Alaris are still going to be limited to 6-inch movement, 12-inch charge. Your Virtus Praetors have a 14-inch movement, which is almost the same comparatively to not only just the movement, comparatively to the movement plus the charge of the Alaris after deep striking in. So Alaris have a lot greater potential to be kited by units of Eradicators, especially since they're assault weapons. So Eradicators, then, you deep strike the Alaris in, you fail the charge, and then he moves 6 inches plus a d6 away and is hitting you on 4s, re-rolling. So your Alaris are, now 15 or 18 inches away, depending on that advance roll, which doesn't put you in great counterpunch position, at that point. And if he's screening really well, he might feed you a unit in order to kind of keep you at bay. But I see a lot less play in that kind of move compared to what the Virtus Praetors bring to the table, in that they both just have good guns, they have good range, they have good speed. They can consolidate better overall. They can hide better in a lot of ways, just because of that more freedom of movement,
They may spread out very well because of and take a lot of space, and you can also kind of stay tight together if they need to fight terrain. So they are very versatile unit.
I agree. And then go ahead.
Marines, so to say, you would say then that the Marines are the thing that we should watch out as a number one enemy, because there are so many of them and because they are so strong.
I think definitely.
1-1, maybe they might not be the hardest matchup in general, but they are, because you will face them so often. Right. You have to be best prepared for them. So that's why we probably spend a lot of time talking about how to beat Marines, right?
Right. Yeah, you have to play to that odds. You can't.
And from them, the Salamanders are still number one. That's what everybody is saying in the internet. Also, what's the number 2 spot that we should watch out for? Is it White Scars?
Yeah, I think White Scars, since the advent of, I think White Scars, since Raven Guard and Iron Hands have been nerfed, have been sort of the next in line as far as what was sort of presumed to be predominant meta. And then obviously when Eradicators came out, that shifted very quickly over to Salamanders. But I think White Scars are, good against us for a lot of the same reasons that Salamanders are. They have some maneuverability right there that can allow them to sort of avoid combat with more infantry-oriented Custodes armies, but also because they get, +1 damage in their fight phase starting in turn 3. That, like we talked about, disproportionately affects units that have obviously more wounds because you're getting more efficiency out of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And they have very ugly stratagem right now that they can give it to one unit. All phases active for that unit, right? So they might have a kind of fight phase even in sorry, not fight phase. So
you have the power unit.
Yeah. So one unit can have their advantage of the third round. Usually that would be the first in the third round, but they can do it even in the first or second round.
Right. It's
I don't remember
for that reason.
What's the stratagem is called. It slipped my mind now, but having the possibility to do 2 or 3 damage flat on a unit in round 2, it's really dangerous for us because we don't have so many units. So even if they can do it on 1 unit of Blade Guard, this will hurt us, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that they can also have such a high output in attacks, so volume of attacks is one of the things that gets through the storm shields, and it's not bad AP either. It's usually AP -1, so you're looking at that 3-up invul rather than a 2-up save in a lot of cases. That can really add up really quick, and then especially if you are, faster, which tends to be the Boxcars' MO. That allows you to get those charges off, and you're not jockeying for position so much against infantry for infantry. You have with that advance and charge, you can get the charge consistently and get all those attacks in and really kind of prevent significant counterpunch. But that's another reason why I advocate for the Virtus Praetors, because with a 14-inch move, they're still moving faster than a lot of those units. Or
especially,
matters
I'm
much.
sorry. I have noticed I'm watching a lot of battle reports, and I noticed that there is a tendency lately that there is a lot of Space Marines on foot. They try to bully the board, walk up, even White Scars, because they count on that their advance rolls they can advance and get faster like this. Which is, if this tendency keeps up, this is very good for us because both Salamanders and White Scars then are also a bit slower. We can control the battlefield because we have, if we use our bikes, then we can control the tempo of the game because then we choose when the engagement will happen, right? We are, like you said, 14 inches of movement plus the charge. And they, even with the advanced rolls, they will never be that fast if they don't use transports. And because of their Primaris transport got nerfed and it doesn't have fly anymore. Impulsor, was it? Impulsor, I think.
Yep.
So it's a heavier nerf than that invulnerable save that is decreased to 5+, because now it cannot go through the ruins; it has to go around all the ruins. So I think that's one of the reasons why the impulsors were removed from the list. So this is kind of benefit for us, I would say, because the White Scars lists got slower a bit, or a lot even.
Yeah, I agree. I think the impulsor tend to be more of a thorn for us specifically, especially if you were playing an army that lacked anti-tank shooting. It just was a tough little tank that could definitely push units up, and then you really position your aggressors or your eradicators or those power shooting units to get really close and do a lot of damage and prevent you from really doing a good counterpunch. I think foot for foot, I think Custodes are Still going to struggle against Boxcars, but I think if you want to play into the meta, definitely playing Virtus Praetors gives an advantage over those more infantry-oriented armies. I've always valued maneuverability in being able to pick your battles and isolate and control the board over a slower opponent. And, I think that is what is going to meet success for Adeptus Custodes players, because it is by nature a smaller, more elite army. So we don't naturally have board control. We have to be able to localize, and you need to be able to maneuver in order to do that. And to me, the best unit for that, the only unit for that really, in way of, troop or semi-troop units, is the Virtus Praetors. I know they're fast attack technically, but other than tanks, I guess is what I meant. Other than tanks, Adeptus Custodes, Virtus Praetors are kind of the only ones that can really do that effectively. When you're talking about clearing objectives, tanks can shoot at things on objectives, but Virtus Praetors, I mean, they don't compare to Virtus Praetors when it comes to taking an objective from your opponent or aggressing in a position that is going to set you up for that board control.
Yes. So basically, if you are prepared and you are confident you can handle both White Scars and Salamanders, I think any other chapter of Marines is easier than those two.
I think so. Yeah, I think if you look at their inherent advantages and whatnot, I think that's definitely sound. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts more on the Necrons, because I've heard a few things on Necrons, but I haven't heard a lot, and I don't know if you've done any research on them.
Yeah, that's a Necrons are a difficult matchup, I would say, because there are so few of them. People I know in my area there were 3 Necron players. One moved out to the other city. The other one I played lately, but before the Codex was out, and the third one is just assembling his army. So my knowledge about Necrons is unfortunately very limited. It's only things that I have read and seen online that I can speak of. And that new model that the name escaped me. That the model that is
the Void Dragon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the one that is you can only do 3 damage a phase.
Oh, the Nightbringer.
The Nightbringer.
Catons.
Yeah,
one of the Catons. Yeah, Void Dragon for the Nightbringer or something like that. Yeah.
This is something that I think might be an issue for us, because we are only active in 2 phases, and if he screens, then we can only actually attack him in melee, where I don't think we want to be in melee with that model, because he ignores invariable saves. You cannot do feel no pain rolls against him, and I think his weapon is -4 and strength 14 with 6 attacks hitting on 2 ups. So he can decimate a unit of bikes like in one go.
Yeah, he is an issue. I think Necrons needed that, though. I think that was one of Necron's biggest issues, was they have a very sort of horde army that's oriented to sort of walk up the field, but they sort of lack the ability to have staying power, in a more close quarters fashion. So I think they definitely needed that. But yes, for us, it is an issue, because, like you said, he can go through that primary advantage being that invulnerable save. He can go right through that. He basically turns that off. So, and due to the fact that you can't just counterpunch him in a single phase or take him out in a single phase, that only creates an even greater conundrum for a lot of people. I guess to put it simply, you just have to play into the dynamic. You have to get away from his character protection. So that means shooting the units around him or taking out the units around him. And then you need to figure out how to chip off those 3 wounds in 1 to 2 phases before kind of doing the final punch. For a lot of those armies, especially foot armies, I think that would be extremely difficult. I think if you look at the Alaris bomb, you could possibly snipe him. I'm not even sure, though, he gets character protection. I'd have to look that up. I think he might be able to.
He's 9 wounds, so he gets character protection, I think.
Yeah, I heard, though, that he had some special rule or something within the data sheet. I haven't looked at the data sheet.
Oh, okay.
What I heard was that he could be targeted in the shooting phase. He doesn't get character protection. That's hearsay at this point. I have not confirmed that with the by looking and seeing the data sheet.
Oh yeah, correct. He has a rule enslaved Star God, which says enemy models can ignore the lookout rule when selecting this model as a target of a ranged attack. Okay, so that makes it a bit easier for us to deal those wounds in the shooting phase and then maybe deal some wounds in the fight phase. But
a lot easier, actually. A lot easier.
So generally, you would like to probably take 2 rounds of shooting before you even go to him, right?
Because I know he can heal wounds because of living metal.
Yeah, 1 wound around, right? 1 wound around. So
1 wound around, yeah. So and then I think he can also be healed if there's another character model. There's a certain character model I think that can heal his wounds. Yeah. So. And I think most people playing him would as a centerpiece, would absolutely run it that way. So in that case, the Alaris bomb has some play because you can snipe that other character, so that he's not healing those extra wounds. So he's only healing via living metal. So if you can manage to do that at range, so your Alaris are not getting charged by that Nightbringer. And then using the rest of their firepower to, shoot the warriors or whoever else is kind of within range. That'll degrade then his ability to heal, and then you're doing then hopefully at least 2 damage a turn with the Ares gunship in the shooting phase. I don't know if I'd waste the firebomb on the Nightbringer. I mean, if he's a monstrous creature, it's 3/6. On 4 ups, he takes a mortal wound, so that would be an additional phase. So,
he's a monster. So
so if you line it up for the coup de grace, right? So if you're like, okay, I want to kill him in 1 turn, and you could position it to fly over the Ares gunship in the movement phase, drop your fire bombs, do 1 to 3 mortal wounds possibly, and then you shoot him with the Ares gunship in the shooting phase. You do another 3 wounds possibly. So now he's already down to 3 wounds, and you can charge him and kill him in the fight phase. And then if you don't, if you don't kill him, he's, possibly got 1 wound. But here's the thing: even if maybe you don't charge him that turn, so if you can snipe the other character and you can do 1 or 2 wounds with the mortal wounds. And then you can do 3 damage. He's got 4 wounds left, So then the next turn, he heals 1. He's only got 5 wounds, if you can snipe that character. And that puts you in a position then to go. Vertex Raiders now are going to fly in. They're going to shoot him with their salvo launchers, and then they're going to charge him and finish him off. That would probably be the way that I would try to run it with my list. Again, if you can't charge him, like if you're not guaranteed charging him, he's a Nightbringer for Custodes more than everyone. He'll shoot through infantry like it's easy. Storm shields, everything. Like if you look at the Custodes meta, for infantry it's the Alaris bomb and it's the Storm Shield, host essentially, and the Nightbringer really, really prevents Alaris from efficiently going into combat, which is their main strength. With the Nightbringer, and then he eats right through the staying power of the Storm Shield. So I agree. He's a huge issue for a lot of armies.
On the On the other hand, if you look at it, if you turn the table around a bit, isn't that Ninebringer a bit like our RS gunship? That if we fixate on that, we might, lose the game because we have fixated on a single model that might actually not be needed to be killed if we kill everything that is easier to be killed and just keep because it's movement 8, it won't, come at you all of the sudden that fast. You can control the engagement with that model, right? A bit at least. Maybe we can, scalp out other parts of his army, and then lone Nightbringer is not so dangerous to us, so to say.
Yeah.
Especially if you play the list that you play. So fast list that can react to every movement of the enemy, then can control the fight when it happens and when it happens, right? Because it's hard to catch those bikes and those tanks that move around that fast.
Right. I would absolutely save that move that I described for the end game. Absolutely. I wouldn't try to do that first turn. I made that mistake. I fought a Gaswell army. Made the mistake of trying to shoot at him turn one, thinking I'll just start chipping wounds off him. Why not? I can shoot at him. These orc boys aren't a thing. To my rest of my army, they'll die in due time. I was like, but I got to kill Gaswell, and I got to do it every turn, or he's not going to die. And that was a waste of shooting that I should have spent on his objective holders, and then delivered the coup de grace once his army is gone. I think that is to better play into the dynamic. So you're not playing right into the strength, but you're playing into sort of the weakness of the fact that he can only be in one spot at a time. He's only got an 8-inch movement. He's a combat unit essentially, so he has to get into combat with you to be, essentially getting his points value. Because you're not going to win any games playing the single primary objective point. So yes, it's not hopeless for infantry-based Adeptus Custodes armies, but it is a lot harder for them to stay away from the Catan because he can even only having 2 extra inches, he can still do enough damage to an Adeptus Custodes army himself on one objective, prevent an all-infantry army from effectively holding more primary points, which is what essentially you're going to try to do. Without a lot of tactics. There's not a lot of thinking that the Necron player has to do to come to the conclusion of I'll just put my Nightbringer on the center objective where he can threaten 2 other objectives, and I'll base the rest of my army around that. And what is the Adeptus Custodes answer to that? I can spread my units out, right, where they're less effective now, toe for toe against a more shooty army, risk getting shot off the board easily. I can hunker down on 1 or 2 objectives that I hold and lose to primary points. Or I could try to pull a swing where, I play strong to a flank, but then with intent of trying to move in and take the center. All those options are really, really bad when you have a centerpiece like a Catan, because you're either going to be pushing into that Catan with the bulk of your forces where he's going to get max efficiency, or you're having to play away from him and spread out your army where the rest of the Necrons are going to be a lot more efficient, with their shooting and with their greater numbers. So it is a big issue for an all infantry Custodes list. I don't see it being good. That's why I left off. That's one of the main reasons why I left off even considering playing an all infantry list when I got into it, because I'd played enough war games and strategy games and tactical games to know, if you're going to play a small elite army, it's best to be fast. It's best to have maneuver. It's best to have, that plus rather than that minus. It's always better to have that plus rather than that minus. When you're talking tactics, when you're talking about moving from a deployment zone onto another position in a dynamic environment where the enemy is trying to keep you from doing that. Doesn't make any sense for me to do anything other,
I will definitely try to get a game against new Necrons. I even finished my project of making a Necron team table that I will soon show on the YouTube. I made a nice video about it, about that table. So I need to make a battle report, but for that I need a painted Necron army. That nobody has a finished painted army yet.
Right.
But at least I will get some game versus unpainted, and I'll report next time we meet. For now, only experience I have versus the old Necrons, they had too little firepower. They were too soft, so to say, to face Custodes. That was my experience. That we were, for them, too tough. We could handle their numbers and both the allied troops and their regular troops without any issues. That was my experience I had playing Custodes versus Necrons, the old Necrons. The new Necrons I unfortunately haven't played yet, so
I think yes. I think in general, and again, obviously we're speaking from a very limited meta. And obviously, the more limited the meta, the less people are playing them, competitively, which means that the players who do play them are not getting as much experience to make them the best army that they can be. But there is a really good Necron player here in and around Pittsburgh who has played very efficiently. I remember when he was one of the guys I played when I first started playing Custodes, and I played an all-bike army. And got squashed actually by him. He was a very good player, but he very efficiently used the basically their jet bike variants, with the shooting the destroyers.
They're ugly.
Yeah, and those other little jet bike guys that look like they're in like a carnival ride thing looking thing, like a little cockpit, whatever it is. And then race, so I think though that combination of those three units, can be really, really devastating. More so even to, I think, an all infantry Custodes army. But I agree, infantry upon infantry, like an infantry Necron army versus an infantry Custodes army, I think does favor a Custode army because we can go and we can hold the objectives. They have to try to shoot us off the objectives. Their infantry is not a match for our infantry, generally speaking. So in that matchup, I definitely think we would have the advantage. But I don't think that that's the case anymore on the basis of just the Catan alone, let alone some of the other dynamics that I've been hearing about, some of the revive stuff and just some of the other things. I think there's going to be more. You'll see more destroyers being more of a staple. I think they've always been a staple, but I think you're going to see them used a little bit more efficiently and effectively against foot-slogging armies that are more elite. But I don't know how that would compare to White Scars or Salamanders. I definitely don't think I would put them on par as far as like actual time spent having to figure out strategy prior.
Especially that there is not so many Necron players, so right. The chance that you will face a Necron player during the tournament are much lower than you will face a Space Marine player.
Yeah.
So I think for the next month we'll see how the meta develops and what lists are present themselves from the Necron side. I will try to do some more research on that, and I will try to get my locals to play some Necron, so I get the first person view of that as well. And we come back to that discussion next month. What do you think is the third? I think we have time for one more, and I think we should choose from probably Adeptus Custodes, so sisters.
I was actually gonna suggest maybe waiting for like an in-depth thing for instance, because we talked about Space Marines and Necrons. Maybe we should talk about Adeptus Custodes and Imperial Guard next time. That's kind of like the two staple. But I was just going to say, I think, and for that is kind of maybe a little bit more of a closing remark. I think that those two armies might be sort of the hidden gem of the meta that a lot of people are overlooking. And maybe we
mean Sisters and Guard?
Sisters and Guard, and maybe we can save that for next time.
I've seen some complaints, or maybe not complaints, but remarks from the Custodes community that they are very strong right now, and that's what we spoke about at the beginning because of the meta and heavy bolter changes that were not. They changed the weapons, but not the points. So the same units got much more efficient all of a sudden.
Yep.
So
I think there was some. I think yes, I agree with that, and I think also compared to like Necrons, there are more experienced players playing them. Like I think that's the other piece of that puzzle. Is what I've noticed is that there are some more consistent Adeptus Custodes players, and they also have tended to be used for soup a lot. So there's people who maybe don't play full Adeptus Custodes, but they've done enough for research and work to include units within their own armies in way of Imperial soup. So, so like I said, I think they are kind of like a hidden gem, and I think Guard also for a lot of the same reasons. Both of those armies I think could really, really come to the fore. Be really good in this new edition coming up soon. Again, it depends on who's coming out next and all that, but and maybe that's a little bit more where Necrons come in as a counterweight, because I think Necrons would probably be a little more efficient against those two armies in some ways. But like you said, we could talk about that in the whole segment.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a very good friend that is playing Sisters, so that would be pretty easy for me to get a game or two to see those changes firsthand. And unless the restrictions, COVID restrictions will change drastically, it shouldn't be a problem. But we'll see what the time brings.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Well, I think that's it for today. Then we'll meet soon to talk about Sisters and Guard, and maybe if something new shows up, because I think there is an incoming book from Games Workshop. I'm missing the word there. Where the RS and all our tanks come from.
Yeah,
Forge World Imperial Armor. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the Forge World book is incoming. I don't know the exact date, but it will be.
I've been checking. I haven't seen any definitive word yet, but they said coming soon. So I imagine that it should be November, December, hopefully.
Yeah, probably. Before Christmas.
If not sooner, yeah. Before Christmas, I think definitely, yeah.
That will be next big shake-up of the meta. That will probably influence us, I hope, in a good way.
Yeah.
Because I'm hoping that there will be some positive changes for Custodes, but you never know what will happen.
Yeah, I'm sticking to it, man. I'm of the mind that it's better to wade through the meta than to be shifted by the meta. I'd rather get through the storm and stay on course than get blown way off course because of a strong
that's
kind of thing. So
there's no I am of course sticking to Custodes. I just finished painting all of my main units, so I'm not changing now.
Awesome.
Whatever happens, so we'll stay on. Okay, so thank you everybody for listening, and thank you Ryan for helping me out there. My voice did hold until the end, so that's good. And we'll talk again soon, right?
Yep, that sounds great.